All right. Hello. Welcome to the webinar. Thanks for joining us today. Today we have Pendo and FullStory joining forces to discuss data-driven product management with a special guest from MemberClicks. My name is Adrienne. I'm from Pendo, and I will be your host and moderator for the session. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items just to cover. First, a recording of this webinar and a copy of the slides will be available in the coming days at pendo.io, and we'll also send out an email with a link to this recording for your reference. Second, questions. We love questions. Please make sure you ask them throughout the session. And if you look to the right of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box. And feel free to enter questions, and we'll get through as many as possible at the end of today's event. All right, now that we have that covered, let's introduce our speakers. So with us today, we have Justin Dilley, Head of Product at FullStory, and a special guest, Duncan McCreary, Chief Product Officer at MemberClicks. Between us, we have decades of product and design leadership experience at leading software companies, and I'm really excited today to discuss UX-driven product management, a topic we're all really passionate about. So before we get into the fireside chat, let's just do a quick introduction of our speakers and the companies. So I'm Adrienne Gajewnik. I lead the product design team here at Pendo. We're currently a team of 4 designers and growing really quickly. And we're also part of the product team. So I've been here about 8 months now. And so previously to Pendo, I came from Citrix, where I was a designer for the ShareFile and Write Signature product lines across web, desktop, and mobile endpoints. So if you're not familiar with Pendo, just kind of give a snippet of what we do here. Pendo is a product cloud that provides user insight, user guidance, and user communication for digital product teams. With Pendo, these product teams can understand product usage, collect feedback, measure NPS, onboard users, and announce new features in-app, all without requiring engineering resources. Pendo tracks 1.5 billion user actions a day and improves the product experience for 80 million users every month. So Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks Adrienne, appreciate it. I'm Justin Dilley, I'm the head of product here at FullStory. I'm relatively new to FullStory, I just joined a handful of months ago, but I've got a pretty broad product management background. I've led a number of product management teams at Amazon, focused on shipping their Kindle Fire tablets and the Amazon Dash buttons. And then most recently, before joining FullStory, I led Home Depot's product team and business for their mobile application. So, if you're also not familiar with FullStory, FullStory is a session replay tool that records and reproduces real user experiences on your site so you can better support your customers, understand conversion, and debug faster. It's incredibly easy to get started using FullStory. You just simply add a small JavaScript snippet to your website, and we'll immediately start recording every swipe, tap, click on your website. We'll take all those events and we'll index them so that they can be easily searchable, so you can find and filter and ultimately replay the sessions that matter to you. And I'll turn it over to Duncan for a quick introduction here.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Duncan McCreary. Like Adrienne said, I'm the Chief Product Officer here at MemberClicks. I've been at MemberClicks for about 10 years, and prior to this, I was a teacher of English as a second language, so not super relevant, but I've been in the SaaS space for 10 years. I've worked in just about every department here at MemberClicks, and for the past 5, I've been leading up the product team. If you don't know about MemberClicks, we are an association management software, meaning our product serves as the major system of record and the major database, website, and online community for associations, professional associations, trade associations, and chambers of commerce. We serve 3,000 customers across the United States and Canada, and we have 3 offices: Atlanta, Indianapolis, and Vancouver, British Columbia. We at MemberClicks have been both FullStory and Pendo customers for over 2 years now.
Awesome. All right, so jumping right in, so why exactly are we talking about UX-driven product management today? I think from my perspective, it's something we've talked a lot about here at Pendo, just the blurring of roles and responsibilities between UX designers and product managers. And like today, we have product managers on our team who are wireframing, while designers are helping to shape and influence the product direction. I think the end goal that we all have, right, is just to create these amazing experiences for our customers. And the bar is set very high, and user expectations only continue to grow. So historically, I think UX and product teams have relied solely on customer feedback to inform product and UX improvements. But today, there's a variety of tools that can give you a much clearer picture than simply what your customers might take the time to share. So by combining user analytics with actual replays of real customer experiences on your site, I think UX teams now can gain a better understanding of the true experience of their users, and they can more quickly impact the user experience in their product, increase time to value, and ultimately improving their experiences.
Adrian, this is Justin. I'll just chime in real quickly here. How do your product managers and designers kind of interact on a day-to-day basis?
Good question. So we, the way we're sort of structured, we're within the product team together, which is really great. So we're not in separate groups, but we have one product manager and one product designer per kind of engineering feature team. So we work super closely that way and use a variety of tools as we're collaborating and sketching and constantly just trying to innovate. And I think it's one of those things where some people, feel like, hey, I wireframe, I'm a designer, but I think everyone being humble and coming to the table and knowing that like good ideas come from anywhere, get as many out as possible. Like ultimately we just want to make the best experience. So how about you guys? How are you?
Yeah, very, very similar. We've got this concept that we call hugging, which is the intersection of a lot of different teams here. And so product management is still a relatively small function at FullStory, but we sit kind of within the hugging family, and we interact, and we're largely paired with our product brethren, both designers and engineers, on certain feature areas or longer feature arcs. And so it's kind of the triad of product management, design, and engineering kind of working towards a shared vision or shared feature launch or any number of things, really.
Awesome. All right. So kind of talking a little bit just about UX perspective, since that's the role I play at Pendo. I think, the designer role has evolved quite a bit in what we're being asked to do. I think designers are being asked, to be more data-driven, but we also want to be, right? We want to be smarter. We want to make more informed design decisions. I think traditionally, as designers, we've relied heavily on qualitative feedback, working with, dedicated researchers or conducting usability testing sessions ourselves. I think but today we have these really powerful tools that supply rich user analytics. So I think the big question is how do you balance the qualitative with the quantitative feedback to make these, data-driven design decisions? And at Pendo, our team is pretty small. There's 4 designers, including myself, and we're the ones usability testing with our customers. So we gather qualitative insights through usability testing or customer interviews and feedback, of course, from customer success teams. But there isn't always a luxury of testing every single UX improvement or small feature that we might release. So I think that's where the quantitative analytics can come in, where you're able to monitor user behavior and engagement throughout the journey and then notice the friction points, which leads you to then, I think, start to ask the why, like why are they doing this? And I think the marrying the qualitative and the quantitative is really where the richest insights live. So I'm just going to dive into 3 specific use cases that really illustrate how UX teams can use these tools to be more successful in their roles. I think the first one is this idea around kind of performance measurement, right? It's a common question. I know even in previous experiences where as a designer, you spend all this time wireframing, designing, delivering to engineering, getting it right, and then it goes out the door and you're like, what happened? Was it successful? How many people actually clicked on it? Was the workflow better than our previous workflow? We spent all this time. And but I think that's a big question that designers ask. And here at Pendo, what we do is we kind of map out our core workflows and we monitor behavior and user engagement. Did users follow the intended path? How did they get there? What action did they take afterwards? And we also pay attention not just to the workflows, but also specific elements maybe on a page when maybe we change the label of a call to action or we actually move that action to a different location. And we monitor, of course, kind of the pre-release and then the post-release to see how we've kind of moved the needle. We had a recent example where we were kind of monitoring one of these paths of our core workflows in Pendo, and we noticed that users are actually canceling more than they were saving. And we were like, what? Wait, no, this is not what they should be doing. Why are they doing this? So of course we start making a list of questions and assumptions. And I think that when we start asking why, that's when we know that we need to circle back and ask our customers, like, why were you doing this? I feel like this is probably, Justin, like really valuable, where if you could drill down and see what your customers are doing with a tool like FullStory, of course, it's super, super valuable too. So, and so that kind of leads me into my next use case, which is all around kind of in-app guidance. As we monitor user behavior through these quantitative insights, like we start to ask these questions, like, why would a user spend that much time on this page? Was something confusing? Why are they clicking on this thing so many times? So this is when our team would launch an in-app guide to a very specific segment of users to discover the why behind their behavior. I think these in-app guides, it's just another vital tool for UX teams to use. It's really powerful because it's contextual, right? It's based on the user's behavior within their application, and you're able to message to your customers to have that kind of two-way conversation. I know personally, our team loves using guides to understand the why, but also, we normally put like an input field and ask for feedback. But what I really love is we're like, hey, like if you're interested, would you be able to jump on a call with us? Because we really use guides as a way to kind of recruit customers, especially when we're trying to improve something within our product. So not only are guides great for that, but I think these in-app messages are also used particularly for onboarding new users and rolling out features to specific groups of people or your entire user base. So again, I think this we've probably been talking about this a little bit, just the quantitative and the qualitative and marrying those things is really where the richest insights do live. Just making it constantly trying to be smarter and make better decisions. We actually had an interesting customer case study with onboarding where our customer Insightly needed a better way to onboard and educate first-time users. And we all know, like, you get one shot at that first-time experience, and it's super, super important. So they started using Pendo. They created this welcome modal that included a video, some basics, and around getting started. And since deploying the onboarding modal, they saw a 15% increase in viewership on the materials, and then even more importantly, a 40% increase in the average view duration. So just an example of just the power of that in-app guidance.
And Adrian, do you guys find that discoverability, especially for a complex product like Pendo, is something that is a challenge that is kind of solved in a lot of ways through this concept and through kind of the nudge and at a minimum, at least understanding, but at a maximum kind of a nudge towards discovering something or using something that they may not have in the past?
Yeah, I think engagement, exactly. Just what you're saying, where it's like, hey, we recently introduced a feature. It was months ago now, and we're like, hey, we didn't really promote it. Why? Like, we need to put in a guide. Usage is low. It's kind of hard to find, but it's super powerful. So I think this is where in-app messages can definitely, you can target that specific group of users who's never touched that feature and really highlight the value. And yeah, it just makes it super powerful when it is in context. Yeah. So the next, I think my last use case here is around NPS. So NPS, I feel like we're all pretty familiar with it by now, but it's another powerful tool for not only for designers, but the entire business, right? It allows you to combine quantitative and qualitative, and then really just get like a temperature of your product. Do you guys use NPS today? Justin, Duncan?
We don't use NPS today. We have a couple different mechanisms that we try and use to both quantitatively and qualitatively understand, kind of the happiness of our customers. Although we don't formally use NPS, I think we follow some similar methodologies to really understand how happy our customers are.
Gotcha.
We do use NPS quite a bit. We do it through Pendo, and obviously there's a lot of different opinions on NPS and a lot of research. What we always come back to is it's a great way to start a conversation. I had a conversation yesterday with a customer who gave us a low NPS, and I was a little late following up on it, but I was a lot late following up on it in retrospect. But I called and I said, I'm calling about the survey you had sent us. And she said, I don't even remember. And I said, okay, well, maybe that was in the moment type feedback, and I shouldn't really put a lot of weight into that score. But we find a lot of value as the score and the feedback being a launching point for a bigger conversation.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's a metric combined with another one or other metrics is really powerful. And I think, yeah, just how you said, like a lot of times I know companies there's a department or one person who's kind of the gatekeeper of NPS, and they share out on it like quarterly. And I think the value, just what you said, Duncan, comes in with like the real time and immediate action you can take if you're monitoring those NPS responses. I know here at Pendo, we everyone's kind of monitoring that, and then we're really the most active when we get a detractor in, because everyone's like, okay, what's going on? And then, sales and customer success provide context of like, hey, they've had this challenge this week. We put in there's a ticket in Jira already. We're taking care of this. Or sometimes, just like you said, like we reach out and they're like, oh, wait, I haven't really used the product enough, or they help you paint the picture of why they rated you low. So yeah, I think NPS is really important. And we also had another cool example of NPS, which there's one of our customers, Henry Schein, their team noticed a large NPS response gap between customers with different job roles. So they were able to segment out their survey to different users. And by being able to do that, they addressed the challenges of those users with low scores, and they increased their NPS score by 43 points in 6 months. And I know this is something where, we're all, we have maybe different personas within our, for our products. And sometimes you do start to notice when one is lower than the other. And I think NPS is just a way to sort of figure out, well, why is our average score for this persona much higher than this one? Maybe they're admins versus end users. And let's dig into that. It's just an indicator of, I think, overall health. So yeah, I think now I think that's it for my part, but I want to hand it over to Justin to really talk about the product perspective.
Great. Thanks, Adrian. Appreciate it, and appreciate the conversation, and looking forward to having a conversation here about the product perspective. I think product management is one of those interesting career tracks that a lot of people don't initially get into. A lot of people come from other areas within the organization, maybe design, maybe engineering. But when you really think about a product manager and his or her main charter, it's really to understand and really deeply understand their customers and what their problems are, and how their product could actually help them solve these problems. And so I think that's just a really broad charter in a lot of ways, which makes product management great, but also very challenging. And so, the main objective of a product manager hasn't really changed, I think, over the years, but how we get our jobs done really has. I mean, I remember starting out when I was a first-time product manager, and we were making a lot of decisions about fairly large product offerings based on intuition, based on somebody's gut level decision, or in some ways thinking that they are also representative of their user population, which can be dangerous. But we would maybe get a small focus group or some survey data or a handful of customer interviews, but that's really how we were making a lot of these decisions. And to compound this in a lot of ways, most of the software projects that I worked on in the past when I was starting out took several months in a lot of cases. When I was at Amazon and we were shipping updates on hardware, it presents a really unique challenge, and you spend 3, 4, 5 months developing features and brainstorming features. And then once you actually ship them, there's a lot of risk associated with that to get that right. And as a product manager, focusing on a limited set of data and just really hoping that you can launch something that will solve a particular problem puts a lot of pressure, I think, on product managers. And in today's world, it's actually really interesting. I think in a lot of ways, we're entering kind of the golden era of product management. And most ways, gone are kind of the days of making these intuition, gut-based decisions. I think those certainly happen, but product managers have access to so much information about their customers and how they're using their product or how they might want to use their product, that a lot of product decisions can be made and can really be grounded in some great data. Also, just as an industry, we've moved on from these monolithic software products, this waterfall approach, and especially in the world of SaaS, where you have kind of these subscription models, you can spend days and maybe even a week and build a product and ship it to customers and really shorten that feedback loop. Where in the past it could take weeks and months, and then you don't really get a chance to tightly close that feedback loop. And it takes a lot of pressure off of product managers to kind of get those decisions right. And you can really focus on kind of the test and learn approach and kind of that lean startup model. So that's actually a really great thing about being a product manager today. And also, while it is great that you have access to all of this great data, it's also a lot harder because you have access to all of this information. There's just a real challenge in being able to synthesize all this data down into a couple key insights and key things that are actionable, that you can actually really go impact your customers and solve a problem for them. I know for me as a product manager, I really care about engagement. I don't know how Adrian and Duncan feel, but I think in a lot of ways, engagement may be the single best KPI for understanding how your customers are using your product. And so I care a lot about that. And when you see low engagement with a feature, kind of what Adrian was mentioning before, when you see low engagement, there could be a ton of different things going on. Like, is the feature just not really meeting the needs of customers? Is it hard for them to find and discover? Is it confusing to use? Is it poorly designed or named? And really getting to that why is a problem. A lot of the data that we have access to tells a lot of the story and tells a lot of the what, but really getting into the why, I think, is incredibly important. And so, in a lot of ways, that's why I joined FullStory. I used the product previously, and I was just blown away by the types of information and watching sessions from our customers that I thought, wow, this can solve like a real pain point for product managers, and really marrying that what the quantitative with the qualitative why. And so I think the combination of these two things, Pendo and FullStory, being able to marry the kind of quantitative and qualitative in a smart way makes it easier to be a product manager. And you can make decisions with a lot more confidence and take the risk out of a new feature launch or a big feature update, which I think in a lot of ways is a goal of a product manager. So now, that's just kind of a broad strokes overview of some of my experiences as a product manager and kind of the state of product management. And then I've got 3 use cases here to talk to you about today. So 1 is feature prioritization, 2 is feature lifecycle management, and lastly, kind of product issue troubleshooting. So starting with feature prioritization, creating a strong focus and clarity around the types of features you're building, and more importantly, why you're building them, is really helpful for a product manager to be able to kind of communicate out to the organization, and really having a solid framework to make these decisions and then communicate those decisions out to a broad set of stakeholders like marketing or sales or your executive team, I think is incredibly important as a product manager. And at FullStory, we use this newly adopted kind of 3x3 matrix that's called, we're calling it kind of the product prioritization 9 blocker. So if you think about the idea of having value on the y-axis and kind of organizational cost on the x-axis, you can start to plot your features in this 9 blocker to really get a sense of how and where you should be prioritizing your work. And I think cost is one of these things that is generally well understood by companies. There's engineering cost or design costs or marketing costs, those things I think become relatively easy to quantify. I think where you start to come at odds is really how do you determine what value is. Value certainly means a lot of different things to a lot of different companies. Things that we care about here at Full Story are, recurring revenue, reducing churn among our customer base. And I mentioned customer engagement as being kind of one of the key KPIs that we have. And we use the data from Full Story every day to be able to determine the value of a specific feature or potential new feature and really try and quantify the scope of a particular problem and try and use all of the data that we have and the sessions that we can watch to start to really quantify and put a really strong value to these, so that when we're in these prioritization discussions as a broader team, that we're really comparing things apples to apples, and that we're focused on a set of smaller things, I think, at the end of the day. But hopefully those smaller things are things that really matter to our customers and things that are going to be the most impactful for them and their kind of day-to-day lives. So that's kind of, I think feature prioritization as a product manager is definitely something that keeps me up at night. I don't know what Duncan and Adrian feel like, but it's really hard to get right. And so coming up with a framework that everybody can kind of believe in, and then using the data from Pendo and Full Story is a great way to start to be able to have an apples to apples comparison about certain things and really make those tough trade-offs.
Yeah, I know feature prioritization is something, not a PM, but a designer, but it's something we talk about a lot as a team, and recently just had a big whiteboard session about, here's the long list of all the things, and we know we want to do them all.
Yes.
And how do you start to rank them? And in the past, you mentioned the rough framework. I've used the impact effort matrix, which is like the 4 quadrant, right? Where you're supposed to help stack rank, like what has the highest impact, but maybe the lowest effort. What are the low hanging fruit that we know we can achieve and really make customers happy?
Yeah, no, totally. If I were to look at the things that we're working on, I would love to work on nothing but high value, low cost things. I think the real kind of decision and debate in a lot of ways is the things that are kind of more expensive from a cost standpoint, but have more value, and really balancing those with maybe some of the smaller value things, but things that are easier to get done from a cost standpoint, and making sure that you're balancing kind of the short term and the long term. It's a really hard thing, but I do think just having a framework is important, and then putting that framework into practice so that everybody understands kind of what the process is, and that you're kind of looking at things on the same level, which I think is really important.
I think feature prioritization for me, it always kind of reminds me of that kind of high school exam where it's multiple choice and it's choose the best of these 6 options. And there's 3 of them that you can throw out, and 3 of them, they're all pretty good choices and you can rationalize it. And for us, both of these tools, they help drive those decisions so that we can make more informed, better choices.
Yeah, great. Well, that's great. It's great to hear, Duncan. And then, so the next topic here is, beyond prioritizing the things you're working on, how do you really manage the life cycle of a feature, of a set of features? With the lean startup model, I think pretty pervasive in the product management space and at a lot of companies, launching, learning, and iterating on products and features is just as important as being able to prioritize them. No product manager or UX designer really has kind of the perfect crystal ball into how customers will react to things. And certainly, you can have a lot of great data and be able to take a lot of the risk out. But really launching learning is hugely important as a product manager, and how you define what success is as a part of that whole process is really the currency that you can use to understand what's working and what's not working. So really being pragmatic about defining what success is before you launch something, and then measuring that performance against your success criteria so that you can start to say, how would we improve this specific feature, and what is working and what isn't working, and where should we invest more of our time and where shouldn't we? And it's hard to balance a lot of these small, quicker iterations of already launched features with maybe a new product that kind of feels new and shiny. So having that clear sense of what success looks like before you launch and then being able to measure that after you launch, I think creates a better comparison between the new and shiny and kind of the existing in market. And so, here is an example of something that I've used here at FullStory as well as in past jobs. And so, for example, we use FullStory when we launch a new feature that we want to understand just how many customers have used it, and then how many customers are using it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And so if we can start to segment our users in a way with heavy users and medium users and then lighter users, and then start to watch some of those sessions associated with them and drill into the quantitative and qualitative data, I think that paints a great picture for us. And so if you see that a feature is driving up daily active users across your platform for customers that have engaged this, you can start to make better decisions about, hey, this is really interesting that we're seeing our daily active users go up, and we start to see, wow, customers are really engaging deeply with a particular feature. Makes it easier for us to be able to say, yeah, let's take the time to make that next version or build that next version of the product based on real live customer usage. And so, on the other hand, if you launch something and engage very good, you'll see that using a product like FullStory. And let's say you can use kind of our Omni Search feature. You can easily start to search for segments of customers and watch their sessions and find out where their frustration is, where are their actual friction points. I mentioned this before, but is the product or is the feature just hard to find? Is it just confusing to use? And again, marrying that quantitative and qualitative approach to being a product manager is really important because it helps you kind of decide what to do next in the life cycle of a specific feature. And the last thing is, kind of product troubleshooting. As a product manager, you think of yourself as an owner, as I think a lot of people do. And Adrian and Duncan, you guys probably feel the same way, that when you launch something and there is a issue or you have a backlog of bugs or UX tweaks that you really wanted to get done from version 1, but you just couldn't because you didn't have the time, really understanding those things and figuring out what to tweak or what problems to solve is also really important, just beyond kind of the life cycle of managing a feature. Being able to quickly identify what those issues are, how many customers are impacted by those specific issues, so that you can start to say, we actually should fix this relatively easy design bug versus launching an update to this feature. And again, I think it helps with the prioritization and issue troubleshooting. And, there are obviously many times where going in that you have kind of a backlog of issues and bugs, but at the same time, there's a lot of times when you launch something and there are problems, but they're just not actually being reported by your customers directly. You may see that in your quantitative metrics. You may see that in your sessions being replayed, and some of even just your core KPIs like a drop in conversion or an increase in churn for us. And as a product owner, I think the company and the people you work with are going to come to you and ask kind of what's going on here, and being able to start with product analytics from Pendo and the dashboards that you can kind of create there is a really helpful starting point to understand what might be going on. And it really restricts the amount of digging you have to do. And so taking that to the next level, we look at things at FullStory here, like rage grade. We have this custom heuristic that gives a grade on specific things. So if you're searching for segments of customers that are using certain features, we have this awesome heuristic that will give you kind of a rage grade to how customers are experiencing this. And so you can really start to understand how certain things are really negatively impacting the customer experience. You can also use Full Story to build a funnel and understand where people are dropping out in a specific experience, and then watching those sessions and really getting into the minds of your customers and of our customers is incredibly impactful and important. And then, being able to take all of this information and synthesize it and present a compelling story back to the company and saying, here's what happened, here's how many customers are impacted, and here's kind of what we're going to do about it, is really, really important as a product manager when you're starting to work through even small issues up to the largest issues that might be really truly impacting your business. And so being able to really shorten that feedback loop is incredibly important. And we also get a ton of direct feedback from our customers that say things are broken, or they may open a ticket or send us an email. And so being able to have the context into those things with Full Story, with our session replay, is unbelievably invaluable. I mean, I watch sessions a lot during the day, and when customers write in and they're complaining, they may just say something simply as, "This is broken," or "Please fix this." And in the past world, without a tool like Full Story, you get into this situation where you're kind of back and forth with customers, asking for screenshots or logs, or ask them to reproduce something. But at Full Story, what's great is when a customer sends us an email or opens up a support ticket, we can look at their session. And if they said something along the lines of, "This is broken," we can see exactly what is broken and see the context that they're referring to, which really short circuits a lot of this back and forth between ourselves or our customer support success people and customers. And I think that certainly makes us happier in that we're able to solve the problem faster. And I think makes customers happier because when we can communicate back to them, we can tell them, "Oh, yep, we see this is an issue. We've raised this with our engineering team, and they're going to fix this in the next couple of days." And that's what really builds trust between customers and our company. And it's something that we really care about as product managers as well. And so that's great. And then, so that's kind of my role as a product manager and how it's evolved over time. And I'm super excited to kind of turn things over to Duncan, who's the Chief Product Officer at MemberClicks, and he's going to walk through a few examples of how he uses Pendo and Full Story.
Thanks very much, Justin. So happy to be here and excited to talk about this because both Pendo and Full Story have been just very, very powerful tools for both for myself as a product manager and then as well as building out a team of product managers and UX designers. So I think the important thing to start with is why, and the reason that we're all here and working these professions is to deliver a better product, right? You want to create a better experience for your customers, for your users, and raise the bar. And where we've really derived the most value is quantitative and qualitative data, just like Justin and Adrian said, and really providing the richness and the color behind that data. Because as software companies, we all have a ton of data, but sometimes that data, it's harder to tell the story, and it's especially hard to tell the story to people who aren't in it every day. So if I think about interacting with a support team about why we built this feature or that feature, it's very easy to pull up, Pendo, for example, and say, look how often this feature is used. We need to reinvest in it because it's so popular, even though that feature is the one that you get 10 calls a week about. You're getting calls from the only people who are using it, right? So to create that type of understanding throughout the organization has been hugely valuable. More on the pure product decision-making feedback loops that we touched on a little bit before. I think more and more, and Justin, you touched on this a little bit, but feedback's kind of tough to translate and to make actionable because people will say things like, this is broken or this is not intuitive, especially if you are practicing getting things that are a little embarrassing and not polished out there early. And that's good because you want to facilitate those conversations. So one quick example, we use Pendo, and every gradual launch that we do, there's a Pendo survey, and it's tell us how much you like the feature and tell us anything that we can do better. To get that feedback, and of course things aren't right yet, that's one thing, but when you actually go and then look at the session replay and you see that maybe the thing isn't broken, it just isn't very intuitive, it wasn't designed very well, or we were thinking one thing is important and really what the customer was trying to do is clearly something else based on what they're trying to do in their session, that adds richness, but it also cuts down the communication process. A lot of people talk about the relationship between product and engineering. For product and engineering to be in a room together, watching a session and seeing someone struggle using the product or see someone's true intentions using the product, you don't really need to write a story about that because everyone is so motivated to just go fix the problem. So not only have you better engaged the internal team, you've also solved the customer's problem a lot faster.
Duncan, do you guys do that frequently? Do you guys get in a room and take a look at your Pendo data and watch a few sessions and kind of go back and forth as a core product engineering design team?
So I wish we did it more often. We aim to do it after every somewhat significant launch or every alpha. Sometimes we fall off, but I would say at least monthly we're doing that, whether it's formally or informally.
That's great.
Yeah, I will say, so we have the way we're set up, we're in a pretty open office environment. And if a product manager is looking at Full Story, give it about 5 minutes and there's gonna be a congregation of people huddled around talking about what they're seeing. So a lot of that stuff does happen organically as well. It's just very engaging. Similarly, we're thinking about as product managers, what are we gonna work on next? Should we reinvest in something existing? Should we do something new? We love to just go into Pendo and see what's popular. What features are people clicking on the most? What features have the most visitors or most accounts? And then we'll flip right to Full Story and we'll see if it's a good experience. We've had the experience where our most popular feature was incredibly frustrating to use. Pendo told us that it was the most popular feature and Full Story told us why it was so frustrating to use. And within weeks, because the team understood it so concretely, it's one of our now still our most popular feature, but also one of our features that gets the most positive feedback from customers and staff. A couple other quick examples. We like to get a little bit meta with it. So we love doing guides with Pendo, and we've kind of put our feature launch process onto our guide launch process, because launching a guide, if you got a few thousand users in your product, or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users in your product, launching a guide can be a little nervous, right? It's like sending out that broadcast email. You have that moment where you have to click the button and there's no going back. So we've started rolling out guides to smaller segments of users and then using Full Story to see the flow of the guide. Is it positioned right? If it's multi-step, does it flow from one thing to the next the way that we expect it? Because it's the same old story. We can test it internally all day long, and as soon as someone who's using it for the first time and a customer, they're going to use it differently or click things in a different order or just do things that we didn't expect. So that's been very, very helpful, the combination of the two. And then the last thing I'll touch on, and it depends on your role within the product organization and how product is structured within your company, but both tools are incredibly powerful for creating buy-in for the people who need to, whether it's a formal approval process or just a more informal, really believe in and create excitement throughout the organization. We're not afraid to put up Full Story sessions during a stakeholder meeting or during an executive meeting. Similarly, we'll fire up Pendo and we'll walk through the path and the funnels and the flows in the product to say, we're betting on investing in this feature because this is the experience our customers are having. Going back to the theme, the goal is to build a better product, deliver a better experience, and the combination of quantitative and qualitative data that Pendo and Full Story provide really is a powerful combination.
Awesome. Those are some really great examples. Yeah, I think touching on what you just said, these tools just help make us more efficient at our jobs and enable us to be better informed to I think make those smarter decisions. So thank you both for sharing those use cases. Really, really powerful. All right, so now we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and we're going to take some live questions. So I'm going to check into the Q&A and see where we are with questions. So let me see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so hi folks. First, thanks for the session. I certainly see the benefit of the tools you talked about. In your experience, how much support and time does the usage of these tools add in general? It sounds like there's a lot of valuable input from the tools, but how much input is there to get them running effectively and maintain them? Thanks again.
I'll start with a full. Yeah, Duncan, actually, you're probably in the best position to say how challenging this is or not.
I don't know that I'm in the best position, but I'm probably the least biased.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, very low barrier to entry. Actually, our sales rep from Pendo and I joked after we became customers, but I didn't hear from her a lot during the sales process, which was surprising. And I said, I had to ask once we became customers. And she said, Duncan, I knew that you were going to be a customer after your first weekend because you spent like 24 hours straight setting everything up. So, I would say in the case of Pendo, it's a little bit higher of an upfront investment because, you get what you put into it. So the install technologically, very easy. One team member had that done in 10 minutes. But then going in and tagging the features and tagging the pages, depending on how big and complex your application is, that's really where the time is. Like I said, I knocked it out in a weekend because I was so excited about it. It's not anything insurmountable. I'll also say it's very forgiving. So a lot of times as, just achieving people, we want to be very thoughtful and precise with how we set things up. Both Pendo and Full Story are very forgiving in that if you learn something and you want to change how you've tagged things, all that data is there already, so you never lose anything. So it's very forgiving. And then on the Full Story side, the install, super easy, just a JavaScript snippet, like Justin said. So very, very low lift. Support-wise, in an ongoing sense, in our experience, hardly any. Way, way more value than opportunity cost.
All right, so next question. Give an example of a UX issue found via session replay that customers were not telling you about.
Oh boy, that's a good one. So we have a feature within our product called the console view. And so it's a little, so you're within a session and you're taking a look at a replay and you click on the console view and you can see the console log from the client to start to correlate JavaScript errors and client errors with the session replay itself. And so when we launched this, we noticed that there wasn't a lot of customers writing in about it, certainly, but there wasn't a lot of customers actually using it. And so we went and we dug in and we pulled up, a handful of sessions using search. And what we noticed very clearly was customers were clicking on the console, but what they were seeing was if they didn't have any errors, they were seeing kind of more or less just a blank frame in our user experience. And so it was very clear via session replay that customers wanted to use this feature, but they just weren't really sure what they were seeing. Like, did this blank screen mean they didn't have access to it? Or did this blank screen mean something was or wasn't broken? And so one of the things that we did was just put in kind of this zero state little piece of text that just provides customers with a little bit of comfort that it's working as expected. You're just not seeing any errors at this point. So that's just a really small practical example of something that we were able to chase down with session replay.
All right, next question. Justin, do you ever have difficulty justifying the impact value of spending engineering time on something that might seem harder to quantify, such as polish or improved usability?
Yeah, I mean, every day probably. And I think tools like Pendo and Full Story make that a bit easier, and really starting to quantify those little things, I think is hard without kind of the software like this. But what I've personally found as being most effective is to think about your resources in these tranches, if you will. So have some portion of your capacity as a team maybe dedicated to new features, but then make sure that you have some dedicated capacity towards these smaller things, because it is hard to prioritize something that has a ton of value, like a new feature maybe, and like a little small UX bug. But again, I think being able to try and elevate those things onto the same level so that you can say confidently that, this UX issue is preventing customers from engaging with a particular feature. And we know that customers that engage with this feature are, spend 2 times more time in the app or are, 2 times less likely to churn. That's a good way to start to have those apples to apples comparison. For everything else, I do think it's helpful to have kind of like a separate protected space in your roadmap that you carve out to fix these fit and finish and these polish issues that are easily fall by the wayside for new things or big feature updates.
For sure. I think just adding on to that, I'm a designer. Of course, polish is important, but I think what's really important though is sometimes the visual affordance of something, it might be interacting or causing issues with discoverability or with the interaction. And I think, interaction and visual are so intertwined. I think it's again about prioritizing, are people using this thing? Is this causing issues? And just kind of looking at the larger kind of roadmap and making sure like, okay, if this is a highly used feature or this is preventing people from actually using this, let's get on this now, let's fix it, and then go from there. Okay, next question. Do you have a systematic method to integrate product problems coming from support into your product planning?
I'll start. I think the great thing about where product management sits within the broader organization here at FullStory is that we're part of the same team, more or less, with our customer success folks and our support folks. And so what that really means is a couple things. One, we have a really direct relationship with our support folks so that they can funnel things and issues that they're aggregating up that they're seeing from a support standpoint, which is really helpful, again, to try and marry a lot of this quantitative and qualitative feedback. But secondly, and probably more importantly, because we're on the same team, we also take shifts supporting our customers. And so we'll spend a half day every week, the entire product management team, supporting our customers and kind of empathizing with the pain that they might be having with our product or questions that they have. And I think those two things are really great bases for making sure that your inbound customer support questions and feedback that you're getting ultimately make it into the product in a smart, kind of efficient way.
Yeah, I know here at Pendo we have a Slack channel for product related questions that our sales or customer success is constantly, hey, I heard this from a customer today. We kind of have that outlet, as well as I know they create Jira tickets for future features that customers are requesting, and they kind of tag the customers that have requested them. As well as like they notice bugs, they're immediately putting them in and tagging us so we're aware and jumping on issues. Duncan?
The one thing I'll add, I think it's really important, as you guys said, to have a very solid system to capture those issues. But the way that we like to approach it is once that issue is captured or reported, we kind of, and I never like to think about this way in the rest of my life, but we kind of ignore the source of who reported it. Because at the end of the day, there's only 24 hours in a day, so you have to make the decisions that are most important. And if you ignore whether it came from sales, success, support, or was just your own good idea, I found that you're able to make a much less biased decision.
Okay, next question. Let's see. Has your team used product data or session replay to mitigate problems before they arise?
I can do that one.
Duncan,
yeah. Whenever there's like a full pause, I can feel you guys looking at me.
People don't want to hear from us as much as they probably want to hear from you.
I was going to say.
That's never true in my life. So yes, and I think probably the best example is doing those gradual launches where we feature flag it and we give something to 5 people. Maybe we do a high fidelity prototype that's in the app, and we just see are people actually interested in this? Do they actually check it out, or do they tell us over email that they will and they never actually do? Those are both great ways to get ahead of issues. At the end of the day, getting things into people's hands and then working with them to get their feedback, both the feedback that they give proactively and the feedback that they give passively through something like Session Replay, it prevents a ton of issues, but it also equips better launches through marketing, because you're able to see what really people gravitate to. And so when you go for your next batch of customers, you might have different bullet points in your release notes.
And I'll just throw in one specific example from just my time here at FullStory. As you can probably imagine, a lot of folks that work at FullStory watch a lot of FullStory sessions. And so a few months ago, there was a specific issue where customers were trying to submit support tickets to us, but they weren't able to do that. And somebody actually caught that via a Session Replay. So certainly we couldn't actually hear from our customers because the link between them and us was broken. But we saw, one of our employees saw that this was broken. They were able to kind of quickly do a search to see how many customers were impacted by this. And the really nifty thing about this is that because we're capturing everything and all of the data, we were able to see not only who the customers were that tried to submit questions, but the actual question, the text of the question that they were submitting, so that we could just respond directly back to them and say, hey, we never received your original message, but we did see it, and we're gonna go ahead and answer their questions, so that we didn't have this gap between customers submitting requests and support tickets to us and us being able to answer them.
Awesome. Well, I think that's the last of our questions. So I just wanted to thank Duncan and Justin for spending time with us today. Super awesome just to hear your experiences, the way that you're using qualitative and quantitative. It's clear that we all see the power of doing that. And just thank you so much. It was really fun to talk with you guys. So we will be sending a follow-up email and uploading a video recording on Pendo.io in the coming days. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for the past hour. We'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.